I have no further comment unless the council has questions for me or for Mr. Pappas or for our CFO's board.
I do not. Any other comments?
I know there was a question raised about number of employees and headcount. This was actually something I had surfaced as one of my questions. And for public, we are remaining flat at 180 full-time or the equivalent of 184 full-time employees. And I see Joe shaking his head yes. So,
which by the way is down from where it was in previous years. So we continue.
But flat from 2020 to 2021.
Mr. President, a few comments on that. Sure. So to the point on employee headcount, 2019 final adopted budget was 206 full-time, 34 part-time. And then last year's budget and this year's budget, 184 full-time. Last year's budget, 23 part-time. This year, 22 part-time. So we'll call that essentially the same. But it did reflect what I would call the right sizing of government that we did with last year's budget. Now, that right sizing occurred obviously with a pandemic hanging over us. But what impresses me about this budget is that we maintained the right sizing of government that was done between 2019 and 2020. A few other numbers that jump out at me, and I guess I want to make sure that I don't misstep in any way in my understanding. The tax rate, the local tax rate, remains 23.83 cents year 2020 compared to 2021. However, the total tax rate being paid, essentially the total cost of ownership of being a taxpayer in Bridgewater, goes from $2.1032 to $2.1132, which is an increase of 0.47%. Obviously, in my role as a council member, I've been most concerned about our budget and its impact on our residents. But after tonight, I will certainly be focusing particularly great attention on where, why, and how the other taxing authorities don't seem to have followed the same principle that we did. Because ultimately, if the total tax rate went up, a full penny, which represents 0.47%, somebody somewhere has raised the rate. We have not. So that's certainly something to look into. I know earlier this evening there was a question about the split, or there was a reference to the split between residential and commercial. In 2020, that number was 72.35% on the residential side. This year, 72.46%. So those numbers very similar. A slight movement toward a greater amount coming from the residential side. Another couple of numbers that jump out. Some of these were discussed. We did make the initial investment of $8 million in roads. That will ultimately be for the good of our entire township, and I think ultimately will also reduce the cost that we could have to bear if we let our roads deteriorate even further. By taking this action, we are stopping the deterioration in its tracks. Moving in an alternate direction could result in an even greater investment required years down the road. Another thing that is part of this budget, I know it's small, but I think it's meaningful. There is $100,000 in capital improvement intended for this room, including but potentially not limited to sound system, being able to broadcast even more effectively, and potentially being able to display information, which is particularly important for our land use boards. Some importance for our work here, but particularly critical for land use boards when there are different exhibits and other information being shared. So I'm very proud of this budget. I think it is obviously difficult times. We are in the second year of what hopefully is no more than a 3-year period of significant impact from COVID. Obviously, I'm only speaking on the financial side. The personal impact of COVID is immeasurable. But just looking at it from the financial side, this is the second of what is hopefully 3 years. It could be more. We have $2.3 million coming from the federal government. That, of course, is the money that is being returned to us from people's hard-earned paychecks. the residents of our township. We are getting $2.3 million this year. It's expected we're going to get $2.3 million next year. There is a major string attached with that, though. The major string attached with that is that we are unable to reduce our tax rate. We are not required to increase it, but we are also not permitted to reduce it. So in more normal times, this conversation might be very different, but essentially our tax rate is struck for us by the strings attached to that federal money, which is obviously critical, particularly given the amount. Just final item I want to point out, there is a line item, it's relatively small, but still important. We, Bridgewater Township, pay $448,293 for our 16,790 households for recycling. It is a contract with the County of Somerset. It is a service provided by the County of Somerset. It's a bill that we get. And the reason why that's important is it's 448. Let's just call it that as a round number. Last year it was 408. So we opened our doors on January 1st. And the first thing essentially that greeted our administration was a $40,000 bill, 9.74% increase. And with our desire to keep taxes low, with our desire to have as limited of an impact as possible on our residents, we were really put in a difficult place literally the first day that we opened our doors. I know sometimes the county likes to present money to the different municipalities, and certainly when that happens, that's appreciated. I think in this case, they present us with a pretty big bill. So all in all, I'm very pleased with the budget. I want to compliment our CFO team, compliment our budget committee, compliment our administrator, our mayor, and I'm confident that this is the right path forward for 2020.